But it is that time of the week right now. As always, we're joined by our injury insider, Dr. Jeff Pierce of the Michigan Sports and Spine Center. His visit, of course, powered by Amon-Ra of Southfield as well. Dr. Pierce, traveling man, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you all doing?
Pretty good.
Boy, you're really getting it up there on that Tennessee. You know, I'm hanging out in Knoxville these days.
Are you? Well, if you go to a football game, it's going to cost you 10% more.
You know, I think, not to get into your argument there, but I think it gets down to the product. I think people have a tolerance. Like Lions tickets. Lions tickets went up crazy too.
And guess what? Buildings sold out every game.
Sold out every game. So
someone in the chat said, if your building's full, you're not charging enough.
That could be true. That's what the concert world says.
Yeah, right.
If we're selling out overnight, then the prices are not where they should be.
Doc, did want to catch up with you here, as we always do, but I wanted to talk some football with you. And we're in football season, and the injuries are coming fast and furious, as we knew that they would. I am going to pick your brain on the Tua thing because I have some sobering business stuff that I want to discuss with you and just ask your experiences and athletes that you've talked to and athletes that you've worked with. But we saw some Lions get nicked up during the game. I saw Penei Sewell, saw Amon-Ra St. Brown. He kind of took a shot right around the knees. Still played and everything like that. We always hear this buzz phrase, contusion or Charlie horse. What does that mean?
They're two different things. I mean, there's muscle contusion, there's bone contusion. So I think in this case, like when you get that, like Charlie horse, they're more referring to a muscle contusion. Like a Charlie horse is like the muscle gets all tight and crazy and you can't move it. That's just, it's the muscle spindles kind of overreacting. You see it a lot like in basketball players where they tighten up and they can't finish and we got to get them on the sidelines and stretch them out and use the Theragun, get them on the elliptical bike there on the side, the elliptical or the stationary bike on the side. But like to just start simple, we'll talk about bone contusion. Like St. Brown, I think, had more of a bone contusion. That means you don't have a fracture, but you have a bruise to the bone. That means you've hit deep enough or right onto the bone. And unfortunately, you know, these guys don't have a lot of cushion and padding of adipose tissue, the fat. So you have more direct hits to the bone itself. So the bone doesn't necessarily have to break, but if it gets bruised, there's MRI changes, there's physiological changes to the bone that actually creates more discomfort. And sometimes a contusion is more painful than a fracture, which is weird. So then you can also get the contusion in the muscle where you bruise the muscle. Like a lot of times you get a hematoma. Like if you bruise the muscle can bleed on its own. So you get internal bleeding into the muscle, and then you get like if you ever had like a real bad yeah, you have.
I've no
D-Mac, what do you know about this stuff? Sit this one out.
I had a hematoma, right? Might have been a jet ski incident, but it was this big. I got the spots on my leg. That doc, I had to go to Doc Finley's house, and they took the drain, and they drained. It was like having a softball inside your leg.
Right.
And stuff like this. Doc, to your point, is that happen more? Like, because I know what you're talking about. I blew my ankle out in San Jose. Right, but I didn't break it. But I blew the ligaments and whatever like that. It took me a year and a half before could, like felt
back to your normal
better.
stuff.
Like just felt like normal.
Yeah.
Right, there was always something. Is that like we're dealing with something that he's just gonna have to figure out if it's not structurally damaged, figure out a way to, I don't play with it like everybody else?
I mean, you know, like we say, I always refer to the secret sauce. There's things we can do, but to just finish up on the hematoma, if that blood doesn't come out, like yours was larger, and sometimes it's easier when it's larger because you can go after it. But otherwise, it's like meat, and it's like you got a blood stain into the meat, and it kind of gets in there, and it creates scarring, creates just not efficiencies of your muscle. And now you got different pulling, and just, you got to be really hard. Like the natural course of action is, oh, I hurt my knee, I'm going to rest it. We actually want to aggressively treat it. So it's the Theragun goes after it. You stretch it. You know, they call it the chicken wing. Like the biggest thing in football is that you get a helmet to the thigh and you get this big bruise on the thigh.
And that's what Amon-Ra looked like happened to him.
Yeah. So naturally, if you we think we just rest it, and let that muscle relax, it's the last thing you want to do. It makes it last longer. You're actively activating that muscle to pump that fluid out of there. So like the deep tissue, the lasers, the ultrasound, the electrical stim, those are all devices for deep tissue stimulating to get all that out. So yeah, I mean, back in the day it was disabling. Now we know it well, we identify it, it's unfortunate. There is a natural course of healing, and depending on it, like with Mac, with having a big hematoma where you had a lot of blood, that's more concerning. With this, it's hopefully a contusion to the muscle. You treat it aggressively. You don't necessarily rest it, you activate it.
Which is wild, like I would have thought it went the other way. But in the chat, Craig wants to know, Doc, what's the typical turnaround on a muscle contusion? And I understand there's degrees of severity and stuff like that. But the point of the story is, Amon-Ra took a pretty nasty looking shot, shook him up for a couple of minutes. I think he came out for a couple of plays, then he was back in. I mean,
Right.
it's just, the way you describe it sounds like pretty intense and pretty scary, but you can overcome it in 2 plays, 3 plays?
Well, when it happens quickly, you're okay. It's what happens over a period of time. Like for Mac, his hematoma didn't happen in seconds. It happened over a period of time. Sometimes if you hit the right vessel, it'll blow up quick. But usually it's that seeping little injury that kind of gets worse over time. So that's why you want to activate it quickly, because if you rest it and let that blood pool, then it makes the muscle even more scarred and disabling. It shuts it down. It's like the body's own network of healing will shut it down. So with him, is he going to be, I don't think they're putting him on an injury reserve or anything.
No.
Yeah, I mean, is he going to be a step off? Is it going to be a little different? He came back pretty quickly. I expect him, he'll probably be a half a step off, but he's a tough guy. He's going to go through it. They're going to heat it up. They're going to beat it up, Theragun him and keep stretching him throughout. You may see him on the bicycle when defense is out there, but those are the kind of things you want to do to keep that muscle warm and stretched out.
In the chat here, Doc, and this is from one doctor to another, because you're obviously Dr. Jeff Pierce. This comes from Dirty Dr. D. So this is doctor to doctor. This is high-level stuff. He wants to know, since St. Brown didn't have a break, is it safe to say that he is, quote, bad to the bone? Is that fair?
Well, we still haven't identified. Am I going to play with this, or am I going to give you a serious answer?
I know it's doctor
First
to
of all,
doctor.
The Detroit Lions are bad to the bone.
There you go. All right,
let's just go with that. But it hasn't been identified in the bone. It's in the muscle, right?
Gotcha.
He's more of a muscle contusion. So yeah, he's got a muscle. It's gonna be bad to the bone. We'll play with that.
I just figured this was high-level doctor discussion.
Right.
That we weren't. I know I'm not qualified.
I was ready to retrieve an orthopedic question, but
no. I do want to shift the focus, Doc. And look, full disclosure, I'm just an idiot here talking behind a microphone. I am not a neurologist. I am not a trained doctor professional in that field. It is not your quote-unquote lane. I'm not looking to put you in a bad spot or anything like that. I just want an educated opinion from a learned doctor.
I expect this on a weekly basis from you now. I'm ready for all.
You're ready for everything
from left field.
The Tua thing.
Yes.
We all saw it. Made a lot of headlines. I'm not saying, Doc, when's he going to be back? Can he come back? We know the answer because he's come back from it before. For you as a doctor, because your first, you always your first obligation is to your patient. Your obligation is to DMAC. When he was in his playing days, and anybody that you treat over at Michigan Sports and Spine, that's your first obligation. What goes through your mind when you see something like with what happened to Tua out there?
Well, it's sad, number one. Number two is it just shows you that when we say your number one risk factor is a previous injury, concussions fall right in that category. Is the brain a little bit softer? Is everything a little knocked around? Has to be doing well. I mean, the guy had a phenomenal year last year. It's an unfortunate hit. Is he more prone? I guess the question is, was he more prone to this concussion that happened? That hit was hard enough. It wasn't like, someone shook him, hey buddy, let's go. It was a serious hit that he was playing without any hesitation and went for it. Right? So but now you're in a different category, right? It's number 3 that we're aware of, right? That's publicly known. You don't know how it's going on. There's going to be a lot of smart people. He's got a lot of money on the line, which always dictates a lot of this. Would he have come back if he was playing football for free? No. He's playing for a dollar amount that makes sense for him to potentially have issues down the road. You know, Muhammad Ali is a great example, right? Punch concussion. You know, he just went through. You know, people are like, what is boxing? You know, like when the first concussion came out, not to go sideways here, but the goal of boxing is to knock the component out. Or, you know, MMA, all this stuff.
Inflict damage on them.
That is a concussion. So every time they get knocked out, that's a concussion. They're going out not because their blood supply went away. It's because they're being knocked out. That's a concussion. So when you're being knocked out, it leads to problems down the road. It's
sobering, D-Man. I mean, you live this life like you know more than most, you know?
No, I mean, but it's just part of the job. I think with Tua, though, because of the ferocity, and it happens, and we see it at the level, and I think it's the reaction of, like, anytime, like, when you see a boxer get knocked out or whatever like this, or a UFC fighter, anytime they go stiff or whatever, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's part of that game.
Yeah, that's part of that game. That's why I think that the way that Tua's got hit, like, how many can you take like that as violence? So how many boxing matches, UFC, how many punches to the head are these concussions? Because it's probably in the NFL, it's more like getting knocked out 10 times, right? Like, isn't it? Like, there's severity to it, and isn't it all about, like you said, down the road that we don't know?
Down the road. I mean, there's, you know, again, classic examples are Ali, but there's a lot of guys sitting in corners right now with concussions that we don't talk about. You know, there's high school athletes that sit with brain fog and things like that. So Tua's going to have a very expensive medical team around him. He'll have this super secret sauce going on, and it's going to be a waiting game. He's got to pass a lot of testing, which includes physical. It's reaction times. I mean, we have a lot of feedback systems for reaction times, clarity, testing, all that's being done by the NFL because of the publicity of what goes on concussion-wise later in life. So there's a lot of science behind it, and the NFL has actually promoted it. So I don't have a prediction. He's not coming back in 3 to 5 weeks. You know, 6 weeks if he does phenomenal and he just kind of got overreacted because it was a scare because he has concussions and they overreacted. I don't know, seeing the hit and seeing what took place, I mean, he got his bell rung. I mean, it's going to be more safe for him first and coming back.
And I'm keeping you a couple minutes extra here because I do have a follow-up on it, and people are asking questions about it in the chat because you brought up the business angle of it. And here's the business angle of it. His contract is $167 million guaranteed at signing. Yes. That's the bottom line. When he signed the deal, it was $167 million guaranteed. When you throw this into the fact, and I listen to the Spot Track podcast and follow them on social media and stuff like that, right. And they brought up the facts of the matter. And the facts of the matter are, if he's medically cleared to play and chooses to retire, he foregoes the rest of that was supposed to come to him. He foregoes that.
But he's guaranteed the 160.
167, that's not unless he retires after being medically cleared. Now, if he's not medically cleared, he maintains it, and you know where I'm going with this, Doc.
You're opening up a can of worms I can't. Because I've been in these situations because I'm the guy outside sometimes.
Right, and DNC ENT asked it, what would it take for a doctor to not clear him? Is it possible for a doctor to not clear him for brain defects, for lack of a better term? And that's exactly right, right? Like, and anything that you're not comfortable with answering, just say, I'm not comfortable with answering. I'm not asking for examples. Yeah, I'm talking about the philosophy of it.
I can give you general, but you can be cleared medically and still have reproducible issues, right? We can go and have a conversation with them, sit for dinner, live it up. But when you start going at the game and you have to have that clarity in the game, it's a whole different ball game. You raise a heart rate. Like for my concussion protocol, and DMAC's been part of it, You have to get to 180% of your heart rate, not 100%. 100. You got to break 150.
Because that's the exertion rate, right?
Well, you think if you want to go, I don't want to get too sciencey, but it's a blood supply, right? So you're floating right now. You're sitting. You're calm. You're everything. If I go put you on a treadmill and tell you to max out, that blood supply is going to go to your muscles, right? It's leaving your heart. It's leaving your brain. It's leaving everything else. You have to test him when he's at peak performance. What's going to happen? Are the headaches going to come about? Is the cloudiness going to come about? You know, he's got to make decisions on split seconds that save his life or don't in a football game.
Yeah.
So a doctor can say, yeah, he cleared the test. His MRI looks good. Everything looks good. But he, fortunately, it's not like a fracture. Your fracture is healed. It's a concussion. It's a brain that we don't fully understand. And all doctors that are smart will say, we don't understand the brain 100%. Not everybody's the same. He's now in a third concussion. It's like a railroad system or a blood supply system or a piping system. It's just there's circuitry that has to connect. And, you know, we can pull the Aaron Rodgers thing, go to Aaron Rodgers' school of business and open another part of your brain to reform it. But it's a money question. I've been involved in those questions. People know the Red Wings. There was a couple here that were real. And, you know, some people they retired. So when I'm looking at him, I got $160 million. I don't have to play anymore. I'm not risking my life. I don't want to be a vegetable. And Muhammad Ali, I love the man. I met the man. But he was not the man that he wanted to be at the end, right? And there's a lot more people that you can see. There's a lot more people that you see that aren't in the limelight like these guys, that are in the corners that I had to deal with. Like, you know, there's struggles.
Isn't it the question of, because with concussions, it's like you start when you have zero, and like you mentioned it, when you're younger, you don't know how many you had, but once you empty the tank, it doesn't refill. So what isn't the question for the medical, not when he gets back to feeling okay, it's what is the next hit?
Yeah.
I go to my cousin, who's an offensive lineman at the University of Waterloo. If I breathe on him heavy enough, I can give him a concussion because he's had so many, but it's sort of, I've watched that transition, and that's why, you know, the alternatives to different things to help that. But isn't that your concern? Like, it's to get him healthy and to get him to live. You want him to get back to be a productive human being, like you said, first and foremost. But in the back of your mind as a doctor, because you don't know about the brain and everything else, is like, what is that? Is it a push that helps him, or can he take another smack?
You know, some of the top neurologists, my buddy who is the top concussion guy in the city, we've had this argument that there's no literature that says because you had a concussion, you're more prone to the next one. It's what the literature says. There's other literature that suggests differently. Clinically, I've seen it. I've seen it personally. You know, and I have people that are highly motivated that want to return that weren't able to just get that clarity back to play or to feel confident. You know, with this, like I said, if he's got zero money on the line and he's not doing anything, this guy's not coming back to football. He's got 160 guarantee. We're talking business, which I don't like to get to.
Right.
I like to stay clinical. But that's going to be a hard decision, and there could be legal battle because as much as their doctors say he's cleared, two of his agents are going to get doctors that say no, he's not.
And that is the...
That's the rub.
That's it. But Doc, I appreciate you being a sport and staying late on it. Because like we're talking about money. We're talking about violence and money. That's what we're talking about.
I like to make it a little prettier than that.
Well, but people have proven time after time they love violence and money. Mm-hmm. Like they just do.
Yeah, they do.
I never even thought about it. The UFC stuff and the boxing stuff. I never thought about it that way till you explained it. And that's what it is. And I never thought about it like that.
Dude, I had an interview with ESPN Radio 20 years ago on this topic, and it was like mind-shattering to them. And I got a lot of follow-up on that, so we'll see what happens here.
Doc, appreciate you. We'll talk to you next week.
Always like it.
Yeah, there he is. Dr. Jeff Pierce, everybody. Michigan Sports and Spine Center, our injury insider.
Attention sports fans, don't miss out on expert sports injury insight with Dr. Jeff Pierce of Michigan Sports and Spine. Join Dr. Pierce every Tuesday during Big D Energy and Thursdays during Ermanni and Edwards, where he offers top-notch injury advice. Trust the guy that I trust. Dr. Jeff Pierce is here to keep you in the game and performing at your best. For more information, visit MichiganSportsandSpine.com or call 248-426-9944.